Derek Thorne thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought forensic accountants were a joke, and that his wife, Sophie, was just a quiet, naive woman he could discard for a younger model. When the judge slammed the gavel, finalizing the divorce, Derek actually smiled. He kept the penthouse, the cars, and 100% of his company, Vertex Dynamics. He thought he had pulled off the heist of the century. But Derek forgot one crucial rule of business: always know who really owns your debt. He didn't know that the signature on his loan documents didn't belong to a bank. It belonged to his ex-father-in-law, and the old man was just waiting for the ink to dry before he destroyed him. The conference room at Vanderbilt Stone & Associates smelled of polished mahogany and expensive fear. But for Derek Thorne, it smelled like victory. He sat on the plush leather chair, leaning back with a casual arrogance that made his own lawyer, a nervous man named Harrison, check his watch for the third time. Across the massive table sat Sophie. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped in a beige cardigan that seemed to swallow her frame. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was just staring at the thick stack of documents in the center of the table. "Are we doing this, or are we just going to stare at each other?" Derek asked, checking the notifications on his phone. He had a reservation at Le Bernardin in 2 hours. Jessica was waiting. Sophie's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Kincaid, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Thorne, my client is prepared to sign the agreement as stipulated. However, we want to be absolutely clear on the terms regarding Vertex Dynamics." Derek suppressed a smirk. This was the part he had been sweating over for 6 months. Vertex Dynamics was his baby. It was a logistics software company currently valued at $40 million, with a projected IPO that would push it into the billions. He had spent the last year funneling assets through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, suppressing the quarterly reports, and making the company look like it was bleeding cash. He had cooked the book so thoroughly that, on paper, Vertex looked like a sinking ship. "The terms are clear," Harrison said, his voice trembling slightly. "Derek keeps 100% of Vertex Dynamics and assumes all its current debts. Sophie receives the lump sum of $2 million, the lake house in Vermont, and she relinquishes all future claims on Derek's business assets." Derek looked at Sophie. "It's a good deal, Soph. The company is in debt. You don't want that headache. I'm doing you a favor taking it off your hands." It was a lie. A massive, quantifiable lie. The debt was internal, owed to a holding company Derek secretly controlled. Once the divorce was final, he would forgive the debt. The company's value would skyrocket, and he wouldn't have to give Sophie a dime of the real profits. Sophie finally looked up. Her eyes were dull, tired. "And the non-compete?" she asked softly. "Dropped," Derek said magnanimously. "You want to start your little flower shop or whatever? Go ahead. I won't stop you." Sophie nodded slowly. She reached for the Mont Blanc pen resting on the table. Her hand didn't shake. She flipped to the back page, where the lines awaited their fate. Scritch. Scratch. Sophie Thorne. It was done. Derek felt a rush of dopamine hit his brain so hard he almost laughed out loud. He grabbed the pen immediately after her, signing his name with a flourish. Derek Thorne. "There," Derek said, standing up and buttoning his bespoke suit jacket. "It's over." "Yes," Sophie said, her voice barely a whisper. She stood up, gathering her purse. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. "Goodbye, Derek." "Take care, Sophie," he said, already texting Jessica. "Done, free man. Champagne is on me." As Sophie and Ms. Kincaid walked out of the heavy oak doors, Derek turned to Harrison and high-fived him. "We did it, Harry. We actually did it. She has no idea what Vertex is actually worth." Harrison wiped sweat from his forehead. "Derek, you need to be careful. If they ever find out about the Cayman accounts. They won't, Derek scoffed. Sophie doesn't know the difference between a balance sheet and a bed sheet. And her family. Please. Her dad is some retired antique dealer in Connecticut. They don't have the resources to audit me. Derek walked over to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in gold, a reflection of his future. He had the girl, he had the money, and now he had total freedom. He didn't notice that Ms. Kincaid had left a single file folder on the far end of the table. It wasn't part of the divorce papers. It was a thick, black folder with a single logo embossed on the front in silver leaf. Sterling Holdings, LLC. Derek grabbed his briefcase, whistling a tune. He walked out of the law firm, stepped into the elevator, and descended 40 floors, feeling weightless. He didn't know that 40 floors up, in a different office in the same building, a phone call was being made. "It's signed," Ms. Kincaid said into the receiver. On the other end of the line, a deep, gravelly voice responded. "Good. Initiate phase 1. Freeze the credit lines." "Immediately, Mr. Sterling." 3 weeks later, the ink was dry, and Derek was living inside a music video. He had moved Jessica into the penthouse. Jessica was 24, an influencer with a stunning smile and a taste for things that sparkled. She had redecorated the apartment, replacing Sophie's tasteful, muted art with gaudy modern pieces and velvet furniture. Derek didn't care. He was too busy preparing for the Vertex relaunch. He stood in his office at Vertex Dynamics headquarters, looking at the large screen displaying the company's metrics. Projections are up 400%, his COO, a sycophant named Greg, said. Now that we don't have to hide the revenue, we can finally announce the partnership with the logistics firms in Europe. "Launch it," Derek said, sipping an espresso. "I want a press release out by noon. Vertex Dynamics emerges from restructuring stronger than ever." Use those words. "You got it, boss." Derek sat down at his desk. He opened his banking app. The $2 million he had paid Sophie was a dent, sure, but he had $10 million sitting in the offshore account, ready to be reinvested back into Vertex as angel capital. This would legitimize the money. It was the perfect laundry cycle. He clicked on the transfer button to move the first tranche of $500,000 from his shell company, Blue Horizon Ltd., to Vertex's operating account. Processing. The little wheel spun. Error. Transaction declined. Code 404. Derek frowned. He clicked it again. Error. Account frozen. Please contact your financial institution. What the hell? Derek muttered. He picked up his office phone and dialed the private banker he used in the Caymans. "This is the voicemail of..." He hung up and tried again. Straight to voicemail. A cold prickle of irritation ran down his neck. He tried to log in to the Vertex primary business account at Chase. He needed to make payroll in 2 days. Access denied. Administrative lock in place. Derek slammed the mouse down. "Greg!" he shouted. Greg ran in. "Yeah, Derek?" "Why is the business account locked? Did you mess up the password?" "No, I was just coming to tell you. The corporate credit cards were declined. I tried to order the catering for the launch party, and the Amex black card bounced." "Bounced?" Derek stood up, his face flushing red. "That card has a $2 million limit. It doesn't bounce." "It did. The vendor said the issuer marked the card as stolen or compromised." "Compromised?" Derek grabbed his jacket. "It's a glitch. It has to be. I'm going to the bank." He stormed out of the office, ignoring the confused looks of his employees. He drove his Porsche Panamera a little too fast down the street to the local branch. He marched inside, demanding to see the manager. 10 minutes later, he was sitting in a cubicle across from a branch manager named Mrs. Gable, who looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Thorne," she said, typing on her keyboard, "I see the issue here. A lien has been placed on all accounts associated with Vertex Dynamics and your personal accounts." "A lien? By who? The IRS?" Derek's heart skipped a beat. If the IRS was involved, he was dead. "No, sir, not the government." Mrs. Gable turned the screen slightly. "It's a commercial lien based on a breach of contract regarding your primary business loan." "My business loan?" Derek laughed nervously. "I don't have a business loan. Vertex is self-funded. We have zero debt. That was the whole point of the divorce settlement." "According to this," Mrs. Gable said, adjusting her glasses, "Vertex Dynamics has a standing credit facility of $15 million secured against the intellectual property of the software. The note was called in this morning." "Called in? Who holds the note?" Mrs. Gable squinted at the screen. "It was sold 3 weeks ago. The previous holder, Silicon Valley Bank, sold the debt package to a private equity firm called Sterling Holdings." Derek froze. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "I don't know a Sterling Holdings, and I certainly didn't authorize a $15 million loan against the IP." Then a memory flashed. 4 years ago, in the early days of Vertex, he needed cash fast to buy servers. Sophie had said, "My dad knows some people in finance. Maybe he can help?" Derek had laughed at her. "Your dad sells antique clocks, Sophie. I need millions, not pocket change." But a week later, a contract had arrived from a generic lender. The terms were amazing. Too good to be true. Derek had signed it without reading the fine print because he was desperate. He had assumed it was just some venture capital fund. "Sterling," Derek whispered. He pulled out his phone and frantically Googled Sterling Holdings. The first result was a Bloomberg article from 2 years ago, "The Silent Titans, How the Sterling Family Controls Global Supply Chains." He scrolled down. Founder, Arthur Sterling. Arthur. Sophie's father's name was Arthur. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. He had met Arthur maybe 5 times in 10 years. The man was always wearing tweed, sitting in a dusty library in Connecticut, talking about 18th century horology. He looked like a grandfather who smelled of peppermint and old paper. Derek had treated him like an idiot. He had bragged about his car in front of him. He had checked his emails during Thanksgiving dinner. "Your dad is a nice guy, Soph, but man, is he boring," Derek had told her once. Derek looked up at Mrs. Gable. "How fast do I have to pay it back?" "When a note is called due to a change of control clause, which was triggered by your divorce, sir, the payment is usually due within 48 hours. If not paid, the lender has the right to seize the collateral." "The collateral?" Derek choked out. "The intellectual property," Mrs. Gable read. "The source code for Vertex." Derek stood up, his legs shaking. If he lost the source code, Vertex was just an empty office building with nice chairs. He had 48 hours to come up with $15 million. He walked out of the bank into the bright sunlight, but the world looked grey. He dialed Jessica. "Hey, baby," Jessica chirped. "I'm at Cartier. Which bracelet do you like better? The—" "Shut up," Derek snapped. "Listen to me. Don't buy anything. Put the cards away." "Excuse me. Don't talk to me like that, Derek. You promised—" "I said put the damn cards away," he screamed, causing a woman on the sidewalk to steer her stroller away from him. "We have a problem." He hung up and dialed the one number he swore he would never call again. Sophie. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, lighter than he had heard it in years. "Sophie," Derek said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. "I need to talk to your father." "Oh?" Sophie sounded genuinely surprised. "Why?" "Don't play dumb, Sophie. Sterling Holdings? That's your dad, isn't it? He just froze my accounts. He's trying to bankrupt me over some loan I signed 4 years ago." There was a pause. Then Sophie spoke, her voice devoid of the timidness he was used to. "He's not trying to bankrupt you, Derek. He's just calling in a debt. Isn't that just business? You always told me business isn't personal." "Sophie, he's asking for $15 million in 48 hours. I don't have that liquid." "Well," Sophie said, "maybe you should sell something. I hear the penthouse is nice this time of year." "Sophie, please, tell him to back off. If he takes the IP, Vertex is dead. This is my life's work." "Actually, Derek," Sophie said, and he could hear the smile in her voice, "that IP was built on the loan my father gave you. So technically, it's his life's work. You were just managing it." "Sophie." "I have to go, Derek. I have a date." "A date? With who?" "Someone who actually reads the contracts he signs. Goodbye." The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone. A date. It had been 3 weeks. He ran to his car. He wasn't going back to the office. He was driving to Connecticut. He was going to confront the old man in his dusty library and threaten him with a lawsuit that would bury him. Derek sped onto the highway, the speedometer climbing to 90. He didn't know that he was driving straight into the lion's den. Arthur Sterling wasn't an antique dealer. That was his hobby. Arthur Sterling was the man who taught Wall Street how to kill. The drive to Connecticut usually took 2 hours. Derek made it in 80 minutes, his Porsche tearing through the quiet, leafy suburbs of Greenwich like a silver bullet. The adrenaline that had spiked in the bank was beginning to curdle into a cold, heavy dread in his stomach. He kept replaying the last 10 years in his head. Arthur Sterling. The man wore sweater vests. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo. He lived in a house that, while large, was old and drafty, a colonial relic that smelled of cedar and dust. There was no way that man was a titan of industry. Sophie must have been lying. It was a bluff, a desperate, final claw swipe from a woman scorned. Derek turned off the main highway onto the private road leading to the Sterling estate. He expected the usual rusted iron gate that always squeaked when it opened. Instead, he was met by a wall of reinforced steel and stone. The old gate was gone. In its place stood a formidable security checkpoint that looked more like the entrance to a military base than a retiree's home. A camera mounted on a black pillar swiveled, focusing its lens directly on Derek's face through the windshield. Derek rolled down his window as a uniformed guard stepped out of the booth. This wasn't the local neighborhood watch. The guard was wearing a tactical vest, and the emblem on his shoulder read, "Blackstone Security." "Name?" the guard asked, his voice flat. "Derek Thorne. I'm family. Let me in." The guard didn't blink. He tapped a tablet. "Mr. Thorne, ex-family. You're not on the guest list." "Guest list? I've been coming here for Thanksgiving for a decade. Open the damn gate or I'll call the police." "I wouldn't do that, sir," the guard said, resting his hand casually near his belt. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you, but he left specific instructions. You leave the car here. You walk up." "Walk?" Derek looked up the winding driveway. It was a 1/4 mile uphill in the drizzling rain. "Are you joking?" "Gate opens for pedestrians only," the guard said, pressing a button. A small side door in the steel wall buzzed and clicked open. Derek cursed, slamming his fist against the steering wheel. He grabbed his jacket, stepped out of his $100,000 car, and walked through the pedestrian door. The walk was humiliating. The rain had picked up, soaking his Italian loafers and plastering his hair to his forehead. By the time he reached the front porch of the main house, he was shivering and out of breath. He banged on the heavy oak door. It opened immediately. But it wasn't Sophie who answered. It was a butler Derek had never seen before, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek. "Library," the man said, stepping aside. Derek stormed past him, his wet shoes squeaking on the pristine marble floors. He marched down the hallway, throwing open the double doors to the library. "All right, Arthur," Derek shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "Enough of these games. You can't just freeze my—" The words died in his throat. The library had changed. The dusty piles of National Geographic magazines were gone. The faded floral armchairs were replaced by sleek, dark leather Chesterfield sofas. The lighting was low and amber, and at the far end of the room, sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a galleon, was Arthur Sterling. He wasn't wearing a sweater vest. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that fit him with the precision of armor. He was inspecting a diamond through a jeweler's loop, the light catching the stone's brilliance. Arthur didn't look up. "You're dripping on my Persian rug, Derek. That rug is older than your country." "Arthur," Derek said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and sudden, overwhelming intimidation. "What is this? The bank said you own my debt. How is that possible?" Arthur set the diamond down. He removed the loop slowly, revealing eyes that were ice-cold and sharp, eyes Derek realized he had never truly looked at before. "Sit down," Arthur commanded. It wasn't a request. Derek sat on the edge of a leather chair. "You made a mistake, Derek," Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. "You mistook silence for ignorance. You mistook kindness for weakness." "I treated Sophie well," Derek lied. "We just grew apart. That happens. It's no reason to destroy my company." Arthur chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. He tossed it across the desk. It landed with a heavy thud in front of Derek. "Open it." Derek reached out with a shaking hand and flipped the cover. The first photo was of him and Jessica on a yacht in Miami, dated 2 years ago. The next was a bank statement from the Cayman Islands showing a transfer of $200,000 labeled consulting fees. The next was a transcript of a text message Derek had sent to his COO. "Just hide the losses in the R&D budget. Sophie's dad is too senile to understand the financials anyway." Derek stared at the text message. He felt like he was going to vomit. "I've owned the debt on Vertex since day one," Arthur said, leaning back and tenting his fingers. "When you applied for that loan 4 years ago, the bank flagged it as high risk. You had no collateral, no revenue, just an idea. They were going to reject you." Arthur paused, letting the silence weigh down on Derek. "I called the bank chairman. We play golf on Tuesdays. I told him to approve the loan, and that Sterling Holdings would guarantee it. I bought the note immediately. I funded your dream, Derek, because I wanted to see if you were the man my daughter thought you were." "I made that company a success," Derek snapped, trying to regain some ground. "I built it." "You built a house of cards," Arthur corrected. "You siphoned profits. You cheated on your taxes. You cheated on my daughter. And you thought you were clever because you moved the money offshore." Arthur shook his head with mock pity. "Derek, who do you think owns the bank in the Caymans?" Derek's mouth fell open. "The Royal Bank of Georgetown," Arthur said softly. "It's a subsidiary of Sterling Global. I saw every penny you stole. I saw every bracelet you bought that whore you have living in my daughter's former home." "So what?" Derek stood up, desperate. "You going to blackmail me? I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you're using insider information." "Go ahead," a female voice said from the shadows of the room. Derek spun around. Sophie stepped out from the corner near the bookshelves. She looked stunning. The beige cardigan was gone. She was wearing a tailored black dress, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She held a glass of red wine, looking relaxed and dangerous. "Sophie," Derek whispered. "Hello, Derek," she said, taking a sip of wine. "Did you tell him about the forensic audit, Daddy?" "I was getting to that," Arthur said. "Sophie, please," Derek pleaded, taking a step toward her. "He's ruining me. You know how hard I worked. Vertex is our future, well, my future. You can't let him do this." Sophie laughed. It was a bright, genuine laugh that chilled Derek to the bone. "You still don't get it, do you? I didn't sign the divorce papers because I gave up. I signed them because we needed you to legally sever ties with me so that when the SEC raids Vertex, I'm not liable for your fraud." "The SEC?" Derek's knees gave out. He grabbed the back of the chair for support. "They're executing a search warrant at your offices right now." Arthur checked his gold pocket watch. "They started about 10 minutes ago. My team sent over the evidence regarding the cooked books this morning." "You set me up," Derek hissed. "You waited until the divorce was final." "Of course," Arthur said, standing up. He towered over the desk. "If I had destroyed you while you were still married to Sophie, half of your debt would have been her debt. Half of your legal troubles would have been hers. I had to wait until you took everything. You wanted 100% of the company. You got it. You wanted 100% of the assets. You got them. And now you have 100% of the liability." Arthur walked around the desk and stood inches from Derek's face. "You have 48 hours to pay the $15 million, Derek. If you don't, I seize the IP, I seize the servers, I seize the brand. And since I know you don't have the cash because I froze your offshore accounts an hour ago, I suggest you start looking for a very good public defender." Derek looked from Arthur to Sophie. Sophie raised her glass in a mock toast. "Get out of my house," Arthur said quietly. Derek turned and ran. He didn't walk. He ran out of the library, down the hall, past the scarred butler, and out into the pouring rain. He scrambled down the driveway, slipping in the mud, ruining his suit, until he reached his car. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them twice. He finally got inside the Porsche and locked the doors, gasping for air. He was trapped. The mouse hadn't just been caught. The trap had snapped his spine. The drive back to Manhattan was a blur of terror. Derek didn't speed this time. He drove 10 miles under the limit, paralyzed by the thought that a police cruiser might pull him over at any second. Every siren he heard made him flinch. He needed a plan. He needed liquidity. Think, Derek, think. He had art. The penthouse was full of it. He had the cars. He had the watch collection. If he could liquidate the assets quickly, casually, maybe he could scrape together enough cash to flee. Not to pay Arthur. That was impossible. But to get a plane ticket to a non-extradition country before the feds formally charged him. Brazil. He could go to Brazil. He pulled up to his building, the Obsidian Tower, a gleaming spike of glass in the center of the city. He tossed the keys to the valet, ignoring the man's concerned look at Derek's mud-stained suit. "Keep it close," Derek muttered. "I'm leaving again soon." He took the elevator up to the penthouse. He needed the cash stash. He kept $50,000 in a safe behind the painting in the master bedroom. It was his go-bag money. He burst into the apartment. "Jessica," he yelled, "pack a bag. We're leaving." Silence greeted him. The apartment was eerily quiet. The lights were all on, blazing at full brightness. "Jessica!" Derek ran into the living room. It was trashed. Not destroyed, but empty. The expensive sculptures were gone. The abstract painting over the fireplace, a Basquiat print worth 20 grand, was missing. He sprinted to the bedroom. The closet doors were wide open. Jessica's clothes were gone. All of them. Her shoes, her bags, her furs, and the safe. The painting that hid the wall safe had been ripped down and thrown on the bed. The safe door was wide open. "No," Derek whispered. He fell to his knees in front of the safe. Empty. The 50 grand was gone. His emergency passports were gone. Even his grandmother's vintage ring, which he had promised to give to his future daughter, was gone. On the nightstand, there was a note written in lipstick on the back of a coaster. "Derek, my card got declined at Starbucks." I checked the news. "Vertex Dynamics under investigation for massive fraud." "You're broke, babe, and I don't do broke. I took what you owed me for the last 3 weeks of my time. Don't look for me." JPS. "Your friend," Greg called. "He's talking to the FBI." Derek stared at the note. Greg, his loyal COO, the man who helped him cook the books. Greg was singing. A primal scream ripped from Derek's throat. He swept the lamp off the nightstand, smashing it against the wall. He kicked the bed frame, heaving with dry sobs. He was alone. Completely and utterly alone. Buzz. Buzz. His phone vibrated on the floor where he had dropped it. He picked it up. An unknown number. "Hello?" he answered, his voice a broken croak. Derek Thorne. A sharp, professional voice. "Who is this?" "This is Special Agent Miller with the FBI, Financial Crimes Division. We're currently at your offices, but we were told you might be at your residence. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding Vertex Dynamics and Blue Horizon Limited." Derek hung up. He threw the phone across the room. It cracked against the far wall. He couldn't stay here. They were coming. He grabbed a duffel bag from under the bed. One Jessica had missed. He threw in some random clothes. He checked his wallet. He had $400 in cash and a few credit cards that were likely useless. He ran to the elevator. He couldn't take the Porsche. They would be looking for it. He had to disappear into the city. He exited the building through the service entrance in the back, stepping into the alleyway. The rain was still falling, washing away the grime of the city, but doing nothing for the grime on his soul. He walked for blocks, head down, hood up. He needed help. But who? His lawyer, Harrison, wouldn't answer. His business partners were likely scrubbing their emails. Then he remembered Victor Grant. Victor was a hard money lender, a shark who operated out of a back room in a cigar club in Chelsea. He charged 40% interest, but he didn't ask questions, and he dealt in cash. If Derek could borrow enough to get out of the country, he could figure the rest out later. Derek hailed a cab, paying with his dwindling cash. Chelsea, 23rd and 8th. The club was smoky and dark. Derek talked his way past the bouncer, using Victor's name. He found Victor in the back, playing poker with 3 men who looked like they broke kneecaps for a living. "Victor," Derek said, approaching the table. Victor Grant looked up. He was a bald man with a thick neck and expensive rings on every finger. "Derek Thorne. You look like hell. I saw the news on the ticker. Big trouble." "It's a misunderstanding," Derek said quickly, leaning in. "A hostile takeover attempt. I just need a bridge loan, just until I can access my offshore funds. 50,000. I'll pay you back double in a month." Victor laughed. He didn't look at his cards. He looked at Derek with amusement. 50,000 for a dead man walking? "I'm good for it, Victor. You know Vertex. We're worth millions." "You were worth millions," Victor corrected. "Now you're radioactive." Victor took a puff of his cigar. "And besides, even if I wanted to help you, I can't." "Why not?" "Because I got a call about an hour ago," Victor said, his eyes narrowing. "From a Mr. Sterling." Derek felt the blood leave his face again. Arthur. He had reached everywhere. "He told me that anyone who assists Derek Thorne in evading federal authorities will be considered an accomplice to money laundering," Victor said. "Now, I operate in the grey, Derek, but I don't mess with the feds. And I definitely don't mess with Arthur Sterling. That old man knows where all the skeletons are buried because he dug the graves. Victor pointed to the door. Get out, before I call the cops myself, to get some goodwill with the Bureau. Derek backed away. The room seemed to spin. He stumbled back out onto the street. It was night now. The city lights blurred in the rain. He had no money, no allies, no home he could return to. He walked aimlessly for hours. He found himself standing in front of the Vertex Dynamics office building. His name was still on the sign in the lobby. He tried the front door. Locked. He pressed his face against the glass. Inside, he could see men in windbreakers with FBI printed on the back, carrying boxes out of the elevators. They were carting away his life, his computers, his files, and standing there, directing them, was a man in a familiar suit. Harrison, his own lawyer. Harrison was pointing at a stack of hard drives, nodding to an agent. He was cooperating. He was selling Derek out to save his own skin. Derek slumped against the cold glass of the building, sliding down until he hit the pavement. He sat there in the rain, hugging his knees. He remembered the smile he had on his face when he signed the divorce papers. He remembered the feeling of total victory. "I'm doing you a favor, Soph," he had said. He closed his eyes. The realization hit him harder than the loss of the money. Sophie had known. She had sat there, quiet and meek, watching him sign his own death warrant. She had let him think he was the winner while she held the remote control to the detonator. He wasn't the smartest man in the room. He was just the prey, and the hunt was over. Derek Thorne, the man who had been featured in Forbes 30 to Under 30 just 2 years prior, spent the night huddled in the doorway of a dry cleaner's on 39th Street. He didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Arthur Sterling's face, calm, cold, and utterly devoid of mercy. He saw the diamond in Arthur's hand, refracting the light, a metaphor for how easily the old man had dissected Derek's life. When dawn broke, the city woke up with a grumbling roar. Garbage trucks, delivery vans, the endless stream of commuters. Derek felt exposed. He was wearing a soiled Armani suit, clutching a duffel bag, looking like a high-end ghost, haunting the gutters. He needed to move. He had $400. He could buy a bus ticket. He could go to Ohio, or maybe further, to the Dakotas, somewhere where they didn't care about software IPOs or SEC violations. He pulled his hood down low and walked toward the Port Authority bus terminal. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. He made it to the ticket counter. The place smelled of diesel fumes and stale coffee. "One ticket to Bismarck," Derek mumbled to the woman behind the plexiglass. "Bismarck, North Dakota?" she asked, popping gum. "That's a long haul, honey. 3 transfers. Leaves in 20 minutes. Fine, just give it to me." He slid $300 under the glass. She printed the ticket. It made a rasping sound. "Zisht." "Zisht." Derek reached for it. "Derek Thorne?" The voice came from behind him. It wasn't loud, it was conversational. Derek froze. He didn't turn around. He just closed his eyes. "Don't run, Derek," the voice said. "There are 4 agents at the exits, 2 uniformed officers by the escalator. If you run, you'll just get tackled on the dirty floor, and you're already having a bad enough day." Derek turned slowly. Standing there was a man in a navy blue windbreaker with yellow lettering on the chest. FBI. It was the man from the phone. Special Agent Miller. He looked like a math teacher. Balding, glasses, a slightly bored expression. "How?" Derek whispered. Miller pointed to the ceiling. "Facial recognition cameras, Mr. Thorne. You walked right through the main concourse of one of the most surveilled buildings in New York City. You might know software, but you clearly don't know surveillance. 2 other agents moved in, flanking Derek. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. Derek looked defeated. "Turn around, please," Miller said. Derek turned. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto his wrists. The sound was deafening in his own ears. "Derek Thorne, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. You have the right to remain silent." As Miller recited the Miranda rights, Derek looked around. People were watching. Some were filming with their phones. A teenager in a hoodie was live streaming it. "Yo, they just busted some rich guy at Port Authority," the kid shouted at his phone. Derek lowered his head. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than the chains. The interrogation room at the Federal Plaza was exactly like the movies, only colder. The air conditioning was blasting, and the fluorescent light buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. Derek sat at the metal table, handcuffed to the chair. He had been there for 3 hours. No water, no lawyer. Finally, the door opened. Agent Miller walked in, carrying a thick binder and 2 cups of coffee. He sat down, placing 1 cup in front of himself and leaving the other just out of Derek's reach. "So," Miller said, opening the binder, "we've been going through the hard drives from Vertex, and the files your lawyer, Mr. Harrison, provided." "Harrison is a liar," Derek croaked. "He set me up." "Harrison is scared," Miller corrected. "He's trying to save his license. But honestly, Derek, he didn't give us the smoking gun. We already had it." Miller slid a document across the table. "Recognize this?" It was an email from Derek to his private email account. Subject: The Cayman Loop. "Once we get the loan from Sterling Holdings, divert 30% to Blue Horizon. We'll classify it as server maintenance to avoid the audit triggers. The old man won't check." Derek stared at the paper. "I never sent that." "Metadata says you did," Miller said. "Sent 4 years ago, just after you signed the loan agreement." "But wait," Derek looked up, his mind racing. "Arthur Sterling controls the bank in the Caymans. If he saw this transaction, why did he let it happen? Why wait 4 years?" Miller took a sip of coffee. He looked at Derek with something almost like pity. "That's the question, isn't it? Why let you dig the hole so deep?" Miller leaned in. "We spoke to Mr. Sterling's legal team this morning. They've been cooperating fully. They claim they only discovered the discrepancies during a pre-divorce audit conducted last month. They handed everything over to us on a silver platter." "He knew," Derek shouted, rattling the handcuffs. "He owns the bank. He watched me do it. It's entrapment." "It's not entrapment if you're the one clicking send, Derek," Miller said calmly. "Mr. Sterling might be a shark, but you're the one who swam into his mouth. You committed the fraud. You moved the money. You lied to investors." Miller flipped the page. "But here's the kicker. The money you moved to Blue Horizon, the $10 million you thought was sitting there waiting for you. What about it? It's gone. Bullshit. I checked the balance yesterday. It was frozen, but the balance was there." "It was a mirror site," Miller said. "A spoof. The Royal Bank of Georgetown moved those funds into a blocked escrow account the moment they arrived, per their anti-money laundering protocols. They never actually credited your shell company. They just let you see a number on a screen so you'd keep depositing." Derek felt the room spin. "So I never had the money? You were stealing into a black hole," Miller said. "Arthur Sterling didn't just catch you, Derek. He let you rob yourself. Every dollar you stole from Vertex went right back into a holding account controlled by the bank." controlled, ultimately, by him. Derek slumped back in his chair. The magnitude of the defeat was absolute. It wasn't just a trap, it was a masterclass in patience. Arthur had watched him for 4 years, letting him believe he was a criminal mastermind, while all the while Derek was just a squirrel hiding nuts in a trap. "What happens now?" Derek whispered. "Now?" Miller closed the binder. "Now you're looking at 20 years, unless what? Unless you can give us something on someone bigger. But let's be honest, Derek. You're not a player. You're not a kingpin. You're just a greedy husband who thought he could outsmart a billionaire." Miller stood up. "We're arraigning you tomorrow. Get comfortable, it's going to be a long night." Miller walked out, taking the extra coffee with him. Derek stared at the metal table, seeing his own reflection in the brushed steel. He looked old. He looked broken. He had smiled when he signed the divorce papers. He had smiled. He started to laugh, a dry, jagged sound that bounced off the soundproof walls. He laughed until he was crying. The courtroom was packed. It wasn't just a trial, it was a spectacle. Journalists, former employees of Vertex, and the curious vultures of New York society filled the wooden benches to watch the fall of the tech darling. Derek sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. The judge had denied him bail, citing him as a flight risk. His public defender, an overworked woman named Ms. Alvarez, looked exhausted before the hearing even began. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Garrison, a man known for harsh sentences on white-collar crime, peered over his glasses. "The United States vs. Derek Thorne." The prosecutor, Weiss, wasted no time. He painted Derek not as a visionary, but as a common thief who had looted his own company. Then came the killing blow. "Your Honor," Weiss said, "we move to have control of Vertex Dynamics returned to the primary creditor, Sterling Holdings, to save the company and the employees' jobs." "Objection!" Ms. Alvarez stood up. "Motion granted," Judge Garrison ruled immediately. "Stewardship is transferred to Sterling Holdings." Derek's head snapped up. That was it. Arthur hadn't just destroyed him, he had legally stolen his company back. Derek scanned the front row. There they were, Arthur and Sophie. They looked like royalty. Arthur in a crisp navy suit, Sophie in a modest cream dress. She didn't look like a victim. She looked healthy, vibrant. As the hearing ended and bailiffs moved to haul him away, Derek snapped. He lunged toward the railing. "Sophie!" he screamed. The room went silent. Sophie turned. She didn't look scared. She walked slowly toward the railing, Arthur standing like a sentinel behind her. "Why?" Derek panted, restrained by 2 guards. "You could have just divorced me. Why destroy everything?" Sophie looked at him with a chilling disappointment. "You broke the contract, Derek." "The marriage contract? I know I cheated." "Not the marriage contract," she said softly. "The one with my father. He told you he would open doors for you. He funded you. He made you. But you didn't just cheat, Derek. You humiliated me. You moved that girl into our home. You called my father senile to your friends." She leaned in closer. "My father doesn't mind thieves, but he loathes ingratitude, and he hates arrogance." "So this is a lesson?" Derek spat. 20 years in prison is a lesson?" "No," Arthur spoke up, his voice a deep gravel rumble. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "This is a liquidation." Arthur looked at Derek with dead eyes. "You were a bad investment, Derek. We're just writing you off." "I'll appeal," Derek shouted as the guards dragged him back. "I'll write a book." "Who will publish it?" Arthur asked calmly. "I own the publishing houses too." Sophie took her father's arm, and they walked out down the center aisle, flashbulbs popping. They were the heroes of the narrative. Heiress saves father's legacy, from fraudulent husband. Derek spent the next 3 months in the Metropolitan Correctional Center. The reality of the Wolf of Wall Street lifestyle dissolved into concrete walls and steel toilets. 2 weeks before the trial, Ms. Alvarez visited him. She didn't have good news. "Stop writing letters, Derek," she said, sliding a document across the table. "You need to take the plea deal." "I'm not pleading." "You have to. They added a RICO charge." "RICO? That's for the mafia." "They have a new witness." She lowered her voice. "A forensic accountant from Sterling Holdings. He testified that the Vertex software never actually worked, that it was all smoke and mirrors, propped up manually by Arthur Sterling's logistics team to make you look successful." Derek sat back, stunned. The glitches, the crashes that magically fixed themselves. He hadn't built a tech empire. He had been a child playing with a toy steering wheel while Arthur drove the car. "If you go to trial, you get 30 years, Ms. Alvarez said. "The plea is 15, out in 8 with good behavior." Derek looked at the document. Plea agreement. Guilty on all counts. He looked at the signature line. He remembered the last time he signed a document. The divorce papers. He remembered how he had smiled, thinking he had won. With a shaking hand, he picked up the cheap plastic pen. He realized now that the game had been rigged before he even sat at the table. He signed. 5 years later. The Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville was a grey slurry of routine. For inmate Danjano 78204054, formerly known as Derek Thorne, the days were measured in head counts and the taste of stale oatmeal. He had aged 20 years in 5. The arrogance that once defined his stride was gone, replaced by the shuffle of a broken man. He worked in the prison library now, a quiet job that gave him access to his only lifeline: old magazines. It was a Tuesday in November when the knife twisted for the final time. Buried at the bottom of a donation stack was a pristine copy of Forbes, only 2 weeks old. Derek picked it up, his breath hitching. Staring back at him from the glossy cover was Sophie. She looked magnificent in a white power suit, her hair cut in a sharp, modern bob. She wasn't the timid housewife he had discarded. She looked like a predator. The headline read, "The Queen of Logistics, How Sophie Sterling Turned a Failing Startup into a $10 billion empire." Derek's hands shook as he read. The article detailed the meteoric rise of Sterling Vertex. It credited the company's success to a proprietary AI algorithm from the Sterling family archives. It was a complete rewrite of history. Derek was mentioned only once, in a single, humiliating paragraph. After the departure of original founder Derek Thorne, due to fraud convictions, the Sterling family took direct control. He was just a footnote, a departure. He turned the page and his heart stopped. There was a sidebar titled, "The Team That Protects the Empire." It featured a photo of a sleek glass office. In the center stood a woman with glasses and brunette hair, but the smile was unmistakable. It was the same smile that had charmed him at a Tribeca bar. The same smile that had whispered, "You deserve better than Sophie." It was Jessica. The caption read, "Jessica Vance, Head of Corporate Counterintelligence." A 10-year veteran of Sterling Holdings, Vance specializes in internal audits and competitive threat neutralization. The magazine slipped from Derek's fingers. 10 years. She hadn't been an influencer. She hadn't been a random mistress. She had been an employee of Sterling Holdings the entire time. The memories crashed into him like a tidal wave. The accidental meeting at the bar. The way she constantly asked how he moved his money. The way she pushed him to spend lavishly on cars and jewelry, burning through his liquidity so he would be broke when the hammer dropped. She hadn't stolen the cash from his safe to run away. She was an asset recovery agent returning it to the company treasury. It wasn't just a trap. It was a perfectly scripted play. Arthur Sterling hadn't just waited for Derek to fail. He had sent an agent to ensure it. They had fed his ego, accelerated his greed, and guided him hand in hand to the slaughterhouse. "Thorne, count time!" a guard barked. Derek stood up, leaving the magazine on the floor. He looked at the photo one last time. Sophie and Jessica, the Queen and her knight. They were winners. He walked back to his cell, the realization settling into his bones. He lay on his bunk, staring at the concrete ceiling. He thought about the smile he had on his face the day he signed the divorce papers. He had felt so powerful, so free. He realized now that the mouse never truly wins the maze. The mouse only runs where the scientist allows it to. Derek closed his eyes. He had lost everything. But worse than that, he realized he never really had it to begin with. The money, the status, the freedom, it was all on loan from Arthur Sterling. And the bill had been paid in full. And that is the story of Derek Thorne, a man who thought the grass was greener on the other side, only to find out the other side was owned by his father-in-law. It's a brutal reminder that in the world of high-stakes business and old money, what you see is rarely the full picture. Derek signed his name on the dotted line without reading the room, and it cost him his freedom. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and karmic justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And let me know in the comments. Do you think the punishment fit the crime, or did the Sterlings go too far? Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder to always read the fine print. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.